Hello there. Welcome back to my channel, Snips by Kelly. I'm Kelly, and tonight I have another two-page travel-themed layout for you, documenting a trip to Memphis. So I posted this video this weekend and created this cute layout documenting a trip to St. Louis, and I use the nested essential dies, which are my new favorites. They have elongated hexagons, stitched elongated hexagons, stitched banners, and stitched rounded squares. Now I created this using the City Sites kit from the Kits collection. The City Sites kit is an all-inclusive kit that creates 8 cards for each of 2 designs, and it includes the pre-printed card bases, envelopes, the stamp pad, the block, the stamp set, the adhesive, some dies, and some bling. Wow. So of course I wanted to reimagine that kit and create scrapbooking layouts out of that. So after creating the hexagon scrapbooking layout, this is what is left over. Lots of great materials and supplies left over to create an additional layout. I actually create 2 additional 2-page layouts out of this kits collection that originally creates 8 cards. So I'm going to document some silly photos here of our trip to Memphis to Sun Records. So Sun Records was on my bucket list because it is the original studio where like Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, Carl Perkins, Charlie Rich, Jerry Lee Lewis got their start. And there's so many interesting stories, including the fact that Elvis could not get picked up by a record label. And the secretary from Sun Records actually felt like Elvis had something and persisted with Sam Phillips to give him his start. And Sam Phillips was the founder. So here's this unflattering photo of me. I'm not my best. However, I had so much fun, and I swallowed my pride and my vanity and allowed myself to use the pictures of my old walking tennis shoes. But I loved the iconic vibes, the old jukebox, the old instruments, and the old brick building that has been preserved all of these years. So I'm actually going to create using my leftovers with the City Sites kit, and I've created a couple half-inch strips here, a half-inch black, a half-inch by 12 black, half-inch by 12 copper clay, and a 1/4 inch by 12 of the Boho Blue. My background is 12 by 12 Misty Moonlight, and I actually wanted to kind of create these strips on a diagonal since they're cardstock only strips. Of course, working with card kit contents, nothing is going to be over 5.5 inches because the card bases in the card kit are 4 1/4 by 5.5. So we're going to have to add some strips. Cardstock strips too if we want anything longer than 5.5. So I'm going to actually see about putting those on a diagonal just to have a fun play instead of just straight strips across the bottom. So I'm playing around with it, and I actually end up doing an elevation from the lower left being the lowest to the upper right on the left page highest. So the opposite of the way I'm practicing right now, but I'm leaving those lay there so that I can see what I end up with or how I want to arrange those. So now I have some 2 3/4 inch French vanilla squares. I actually don't have any, I think they call it Very Vanilla in Stampin' Up! Or Basic Beige, which are the 2 colors that actually coordinate with this kit, the Basic Beige especially. And I don't have any of the neutrals, and I did go order those once I opened up this kit and found out that I have the Regals, I have the Subtles, I have all of the things, the brights. I just didn't have any neutrals. So I actually created 20 at first, and I do believe we need 22 of these 2 3/4 by 2 3/4 French vanilla or Basic Beige, whatever you have. And we're going to create some diamonds in the background. Now, I actually have created similar layouts to this many times where you use squares in the background, diamonds in the background, all different kinds of basic shapes in the background. Sometimes they're separated, sometimes they're together, sometimes they're all the way up to the top of the page, sometimes they're in the middle of the page, but it's just a classic background. So all of the heavy lifting is going to be on the background, but then I'm going to use the bits from the card kit, the bases, the envelopes, and create 2.5-inch squares to go over the top of the 2 3/4 by 2 3/4 French vanilla or basic beige. So I have a lot to work with here. I can cut envelopes apart. I can cut the cute patterns on the front and the back of the card bases and create all kinds of 2.5 by 2.5-inch squares. Now, some of these squares that I'm turning into diamonds are actually going to be trimmed off, and so we're going to be able to use other pieces of the half cut squares. I do one square that's 2 1/4 by 2 1/4 of the Midnight Misty Moonlight, 2 of those, one for each page, because I will have one square that actually has an additional layer. And so I'm going to cut some cardstock. I'm going to cut some card bases, and we're just going to make as many of these 2.5-inch squares as we need. So actually, yes, that, let's see here. That Misty Moonlight is 2.5 by 2.5, excuse me. And then I'm going to actually add another French vanilla layer on the front of, there's 2 of those that I do that to, and I'm going to do some stamping on it. So far I have 2.5 by 2.5 Misty Moonlight twice, once for each page, left and right. Now I'm going to cut the card bases, and I want to cut 2 out of each side. So 2 that are 2.5 by 2.5 out of each side. And then for the third layout in this series, I'll be using up the leftovers and creating some banners. But we're just going to get 2 each out of each side of the card base, and then we're going to grab 2 out of the envelope as well. I love the wash feel of these envelopes. It's just a really pretty, like, this is Boho Blue, but in a wash where it fades and it kind of distresses. So I'm going to do this, and then we'll see how many we end up with and how many more we need to cut. But essentially, if we end up with 22 French vanilla squares at 2 3/4 by 2 3/4, we need 22 2.5 by 2.5-inch squares for that layer. So that's going to make sense. So right now I'm just trying to get by with 2 card bases and 2 envelopes and see how we fare and how many more we need, because I'm going to cut the rest out of cardstock. And that way we will still have plenty of leftovers to make the third layout. So really the heavy lifting is going to be in the base of this layout. The most of the work is going to be in creating the background, just like the previous layout that I'll link in the description. So in the previous layout where I used the elongated hexagons from the Nested Essential Dies, the background was all the work. And in this layout, it's very similar. The background is all of the work. The background is going to be the wow factor of this layout as it was in the previous layout. Now, I will link the previous process video for the previous layout in the description, and I go over the card kit in great detail, pulling out all of the pieces. But essentially the kit's collection is designed for those people that want to open up a kit and have every single thing that they need inside the kit to create the pre-designed project. So of course, demonstrators everywhere create alternatives. So if you're a person that wants to crack open a kit and have the adhesive, the dimensionals, the bases, the stamp, the stamp pad, the block, the bling, all of the die cuts, the pieces that you need without having to purchase anything extra, and create 8 cards from that original kit, then that you are a kits girl. You are someone who would love all-inclusive kits. I love the cards that are created in this kit. I think that the price point of this kit is great. So the 8 card kit is $21 for the City Sites kit, and there's nothing that you have to add if you're creating the kit as the original. Absolutely nothing. It even comes with the double-sided tape that you need for adhesive. So by altering it, of course, you're going to add some things. I'm trying to make sure that aside from cardstock, I only add one item primarily. So I've added the nested essential dies, which I think are an investment set. An investment set meaning you purchase it one time and you're able to use it over and over and over again. I'm so impressed with how many dies you get in the nested essentials set, and I'm going to go over it again here and show it to you here. But you get nested stitched banners, nested elongated hexagons, and nested rounded squares, which we're going to use on the remaining 2 layouts in this series as well. So we used it on the first layout, and we're going to use it on this layout to create some stitched banners and some added pieces for some bits. So as you can see, I'm working through the cardstock now. So I created the 2.5-inch squares in copper clay. Now I'm going to create 2.5-inch squares in Pebbled Path. And I'll be creating some of the 2.5-inch squares in black. And that will be just enough to add those colors to the 2 3/4 by 2 3/4 inch squares to make a super interesting background. There will be a French vanilla piece that I create that is 2 1/4 by 2 1/4. That will probably maybe end up being the journaling piece that I will put on the 2.5-inch midnight Misty Moonlight color. And so it really doesn't matter the colors that you choose if they coordinate with the city site set. The colors that they recommended, of course, were the colors that I'm using here today. But if you're using close to my heart colors, of course, you can substitute. So we know that Misty Moonlight is similar to our sapphire. We know that copper clay, you could probably use some desert rose, would work for that. There are lots of colors that you can substitute. My photos actually lent themselves to this kit because of the vintage musical instruments in the background have that copper clay color. The brick from the Sun Studios has that copper clay color. There's tons of blue in the background of the sky from the outdoor colors. The colors in the shirt, in Elvis's shirt, are all the colors in this collection. And of course, black is always a great accent. So now I'm repeating my performance over on the right. I'm actually using 2 of the pattern cityscape fronts on each the left and the right page. I'm actually using 2 of the wash back from the background of the card, the back of the card base, to each of those colors on the left and the right page. So you had the basic beige envelope, and you had the boho blue envelope. So I would have 2 squares from each of the envelopes. I would have 2 squares from each of the front of the bases. I would have 2 squares from each of the back bases so that the pages are balanced, that I have 1 each of the basic beige cityscape and 1 each of the boho blue cityscape, and then 1 each of the blue back, 1 each of the boho blue back, and 1 each of the basic beige back, etc., etc., and so on. So your squares are balanced. Now we'll have a little bit of cutting of the squares to fill in the gaps, and so that will be something that we'll do at the end, and then we'll trim the edges. So I'm going to get the strips on the bottom, and I'm opting to have a little bit of a slant. So I'm putting the copper clay strip, again 1/2 by 12, all the way flush down to the corner of the black, and then angling it upward, and then putting the boho blue strip just flush on the top. Now you can just put those straight across if you're a straight girl. I just wanted to create a little bit of interest with an angle. Since we're using cardstock strips only, it's kind of nice to find creative ways to create interest in the background when you're using cardstock only. So now, counting up all of my squares, I do end up with 17 base triangles, and then 16 actually, and then I add 4 additional triangles to be able to add as fillers. And so these of course are going to be cut, and so that we'll be able to use the other half. I thought that I had 22, but it looks like there's 20 altogether. We'll hold tight here and see if I had to add any, but I'm pretty sure by cutting those in half, I end up with the exact amount needed. So the most important placement is going to be the first diamond or square. And so what I'm going to do is line up that first diamond at 6 inches, and then I'm going to use my longer T ruler and measure across 2 inches down so that I know that the right and left tips of that first square are straight and that it's 2 inches down from the top, and the point of the triangle is about at the 6-inch piece. Once I have that center piece to anchor everything, everything else doesn't need to be measured. You can just like go to town and layer your pieces all the way across. So I struggle here for just a bit getting that very first piece exactly how I want it, and it's so worth getting that first piece in line. So 6 inches, which is the center, and then 2 inches down for each point, and then getting those points straight so that as you add the remaining squares, it's super easy to just go all the way across. Now I'm actually laying these in place, but I won't be mounting them until I mount downward because it's so much more easy to measure or get straight when you're doing the straight side, when you're lining up the straight side. And so don't worry if these pieces are hanging over, because they're supposed to be hanging over on purpose because we will be trimming them off. And so so again, all the heavy lifting is in the foundation. And I found that that was the case with I kind of carried a theme through with the City Sites kit here. So I'm going to end up, just a hint, with 3 2-page layouts, and actually enough to probably eke out another, but I felt like I had stretched the stamp and stretched the icons enough, and I felt very satisfied taking an 8 card kit and turning it into 6 scrapbooking layouts. I felt like it was cost effective to do that. I also felt like it got me using one of my favorite new Nested Essentials dies, my favorite investment set, and it got me using that, and I used the heck out of it. And I feel like it was a win-win by just adding cardstock and using the existing bits and pieces in the kit, and I feel really satisfied. I do believe you could for sure get 2 cards out of the leftovers. And I'll probably make those up. You may have to use the stamp set to create the cityscape and then fussy cut it out, but I think there was enough materials left. I think there were 4 little bling dots left and a couple die cuts left, and sentiments left, and 2 card bases left. There were scraps of other card bases left, but 2 full card bases left intact, and I think 4 envelopes left intact still. So now I'm going to actually trim this, and I'm going to show you how I actually lay it on my cutter and trim it, but there's a couple tricks so that you don't mess your paper up. First of all, I toggle it so that the hanging over pieces are over the cutter, and the 12 by 12 base is set at 12 inches. And then when you're going to cut bits off the side of a page, you never want to start at the edge of the bit. You want to always start in the middle of the bit, lock your trimmer down, and then go up and down on the bit, because if you start at the edge of the bit, you're going to be pushing so hard through the layers, you're going to tear or push that bit inward. So you're going to come into the center of the bit, lock it down, push it down into place, and go up and down, and it's going to work perfect almost every time. You may have a few little edges that you have to pull off with your hand. They're cut all the way through, but you may need to just kind of trim a little bit there. So again, you're going to put it all the way flush on 12 inches so that you know you're cutting just the extra bits. Make sure all your bits are out of the trough of your cutter, and then pop it down in the center of the bit that you want to cut off, and then move up and down, and it will be perfect. Do not cut on the bottom edge or the top edge because it will fray it, bend it, and distort it. But it looks beautiful now. Perfect. Now you can just simply fussy cut the edge off with a scissor. I just kind of like that really smooth feel of the paper trimmer, and it looks beautiful. Sometimes when I make beautiful backgrounds, I don't want to put anything over the top because I love the way they look. So now we've repeated this performance on the right page, and we're just simply going to use all the additional bits and then trim those off. It's not going to be perfect because where they were trimmed off isn't necessarily perfectly in half. So you have to work with it just a little bit to get it just so, and to get it lined up. And then here's where I'm wondering what's left. I just have the corners left. So this is where I got my 22. I made 20 original 2 3/4 by 2 3/4 French vanilla squares. And then I wasn't sure, but I ended up needing 2 more squares to cut. And so I would be able to, and I'm just experimenting to decide which 2 squares. Do I want them to be patterned? Do I want them? And I thought, why not? We have the patterns. The patterns are already cut. So let's go ahead and do that. This one, as you can see, was out of an envelope. So you could have cut the envelope off first, but this particular envelope only had some jagged pieces of white. And so I wasn't worried about wasting those white sides. And so now I'm just experimenting with what I might want in those corners, and I'm getting rid of the rest. So I end up going with black and the wash tan look. So now I will be able to put those on the corners, cut those out, and then use those on the corners of the other page. So the final answer was 22 2 3/4 by 2 3/4 French vanilla squares. You can use Basic Beige if you're using a Stampin' Up! Color. And then adding an additional black 2.5 by 2.5, and then the already cut square. So you can see that these are going to look funky because I've actually just cut around those, fussy cut around those, and now it's perfect. Perfection. I love that background. It's so gorgeous. I love the color scheme. I have some balance. So I have a visual triangle with my copper clay. I have a balance of black on the lower left, black on the upper right. I have a balance of the Pebbled Path. I have a balance of the patterns. We're going to be covering up some of those patterns, but I'm toggling it so just little bits of those patterns peek out from underneath, so there's no complete pattern that's completely covered, so we didn't waste our efforts or our energy. So I haven't talked about my photo sizes. On the right page, I have 6 3x3s, and on the left page, I have 1 4x6 vertical. I do end up changing out the jukebox photo, and I'll explain why a little bit later, but I created photo mats. So I have Boho Blue 3 1/4 by 3 1/4 and black 3 1/2 by 3 1/2 on all of the 3x3 photos. On the, excuse me, I said 4x6 photo. It's a 5x7. So it's a 5x7 photo with a 5 1/4 by 7 1/4 Boho Blue and a 5 1/2 by 7 1/2 black photo mat. So I had originally thought for the last layout, if you watched my last video, I cut a 3-inch circle out of one of the card bases to put behind that cityscape die cut. Now it's kind of bothering me on this to have that Basic Beige die cut next to the jukebox. I don't know why. It just didn't blend. So I originally switch them out. Then I decide that the colors in the jukebox are bothering me, and I have plenty of more layouts to do from this trip. So I'm going to use the Sam Phillips sign because it seems like now there's a little bit more calmness to all of the photos there on the right, and there isn't that one photo that's totally standing out with the bright colors. So I've cut a 3-inch French vanilla circle. You can cut it from a die, you can cut it from a punch to put behind that that stamped die cut. Now I stamped that die cut with the distress stamp in the last video with the ink that came right in the kit, and also the cityscape is stamped with the ink and stamp that came right in the kit, the Pebbled Path. And the corrugated rectangle is something that I do want to use. And then there is different language sentiments. There's sentiments in different languages, and they're banners. And so I feel like I can use the backside of the languages that I don't need. I'm English speaking, so I'll use the English sentiments. But if you are German or from another country, you use the sentiment that goes with your language. And then you can use the backside of the English if you don't need the English and have that white banner. So I've actually created some banners out of the Nested Essentials dies, and I created them. I have the 2 different sizes. So the 2 smallest banners. So I have the black in both of those sizes. I have a blue wash in both of those sizes. I have a pebbled, do I have a Pebbled Path? No, I have so I have a black, I have a blue wash, and I think that's it. And then I have actually the 2 banners that are the backside of the sentiment piece that I'm going to use. And then I think I do end up trimming a little piece off of the white. And then on the back side, it works out perfectly. That white banner sentiment piece, there's blue on the back. And so I actually can use a little piece from that. So I'm thinking that I'll have some banners going out on the left of the 5x7, the banners coming out on the right of the 3x3s to create interest, and also to create a little bit of a linear feel with your eye. So all of the diamonds are coming down, and then you have a little bit of linear feel from the die. Now I'm actually going to stamp off on the city stamp with the Pebbled Path ink. Now you have a Pebbled Path stamp pad spot block that comes right in your kit. I just happen to be using my full size, but you can totally use the block and the stamp that come right in the kit. So I'm distressing the edges with my mini ink blending tool and distressing that and dirtying that up a little bit to make that cityscape. I do end up doing a little more stamping with this same stamp, but I put it away for now because I think that I'm going to use the 2 1/4 by 2 1/4 French vanilla square to the left of the largest photo for journaling, but I decide I'm going to add a decorative element to that. And so we'll talk about that in a minute. Right now, I'm just kind of fussing with the banners. So this was an annual girl trip. I have 4 girlfriends that I take annual girl trips with, and we've all, not all of us, but one of them I've been friends with now for 46 years. Yes, we have our 40th high school reunion coming up this summer, and we became friends in junior high school. And so 45 years, I'm guessing, for her. And then we met the other 2 our first year in college. And so we've been friends with them for 40 years. And so I'm super, super excited to share, and I'm proud to share that longevity in my friendships. Now, what I do here is I make a mistake. I actually stamp the stamp on the first French vanilla piece straight, like a straight square. And then I realized I needed to stamp it on a diagonal because the square is going in there diagonally, like vertically, like a diamond. And I just wanted to create that cityscape in the background and layer the die cut piece over the top again to add dimension. It's just one more way to add dimension by stamping directly on a background and then popping something up over the top. And I love that look. Anyway, we take an annual girl trip every year. We've missed a few years since COVID. And we've kind of broken off, and we've been taking trips like separately with one or two of us. But we originally, all four of us, took trips every single year for years and years, and we've gone all over. Of course, in the early years when we were raising children, we took the cheapest trips we could possibly take, and we would go to state parks, and we would drive, and we would camp, and we would, of course, all of us bunk in a single cabin or a single hotel room or something like that. And we have rules for our trip. And each of us would rotate. So there's four of us. So every 4 years, it would be your turn to plan the trip. And we would have to plan the trip following different rules. So what I'm doing here is I'm dovetailing the corrugated pieces and bits to add these to different places. I actually cut the top off of some of the sentiment pieces to just create some rounded elements. We have a lot of straight edges, we have a lot of boxy and a lot of squares. And so I'm using the rounded tops of those sentiments to add some added interest. Now I'm pulling out some acrylic shapes for the title because we don't have title opportunities, and I'm actually breaking off a piece of an X that I don't think I'll use to make the apostrophe. And I thought it was appropriate with Elvis to say that's all right, because I am using the famous microphone of Elvis, and there's just an aura there. It's so cool to be there. But our rules are always that some part of the trip needs to be educational, some part of the trip needs to be back to nature, it needs to be great food, and it needs to be on a budget. And so this was the educational portion of our trip, learning all about Sun Records, and what a history it is. So I am loving it. Look how much we still have left. So much left. It's incredible. So of course I'm going to do another 2-page layout out of the leftovers next, and adding just a little bit of bling with the copper gems or copper dots that came in the kit, and I'm getting happy. It was a little bit of work getting that background, but I love it, and I'm so happy to be able to document this girl trip that's been sitting there since 2017. I haven't had an opportunity to get it scrapped. I love the extra bits. I love that it ties into the city theme, and I hope you love the City Sites card kit reimagined into a scrapbooking layout. Stay tuned, hit subscribe and the notifications bell, shoot me a comment, and stay tuned right here on Snips by Kelly for layout number 3 that we're stretching out of an 8-card kit to get 6 scrapbooking layouts out of an 8-card kit. Happy scrapping, everyone. Bye-bye now.